these questions will be pretty simple. And the first question over here is, what do you understand by database and what does it have? A database can be defined as the structured form of data storage from which data can be retrieved and managed based on the requirements. So basically, a database consists of tables where data is stored in an organized manner. And each table consists of rows and columns to store the data. Data can be stored, modified, updated, and accessed easily in a database. So for example, a bank management database or a school management database are few examples of databases. Okay, so this was a pretty simple question. The next question is, what do you mean by DBMS and RDBMS? So DBMS is nothing but database management system. So this is a software that allows storing, modifying, and retrieving data from a database. And it is a group of programs that act as the interface between data and the applications. So DBMS supports receiving queries from applications and retrieving the data from the database. Okay, and now if you talk about RDBMS, so RDBMS is nothing but relational database management system. RDBMS is also a software that allows storing, modifying, and retrieving data from a database. In relational database, the data in the tables have a relationship. So that's why the R component is present in RDBMS. So besides that, RDBMS is useful when data in tables are being managed securely and consistently. So the next question is, what are query and query languages? So query is nothing but a request sent to a database to retrieve data or information. The required data can be retrieved from a table or many tables in the database. So query language uses various types of queries to retrieve the data from the databases. So SQL, Datalog, and AQL are a few examples of query languages. However, SQL is known to be widely used as a query language. So SQL returns data as columns and rows in a table, whereas other languages return data in forms like graphs, charts, and so on. The next question is, what do you mean by a subquery? So it is a query that exists inside the statements such as select, insert, update, and delete. So it may exist inside a subquery too. So a subquery is also known as an inner query or an inner select. So the statement within a subquery is an outer query or outer select. So just for your reference, I've attached a screenshot over here, which shows us what is a subquery. So in the example shown below, which the maximum unit price is the result that will be returned by the subquery using the select statement. Also, the orders is the value that will be returned by the outer query using the select statement. So over here, as you can see, this is the main query, select ord.sales order ID, and this is another column over here, and there's another column over here called as max unit price. And how do you derive the max unit price? So for that, we have written a subquery. Okay, as you can see here, in this round braces, we have written one query. So this is nothing but a subquery. And I hope you are clear with the example over here. And now you have an idea of what exactly is a subquery. So let's move ahead. So the next question is, what is SQL, and mention its uses? So SQL stands for Structured Query Language, as we have already discussed earlier. So SQL is known as the query programming language. It uses SQL queries to store, modify, and retrieve data into and from databases. So briefly, SQL inserts, updates, and deletes data in databases, creates new databases and new tables, and it also creates views and stored procedures. Apart from that, it also sets permissions on the database objects. So this was all about SQL and its uses. The next question is, what is dynamic SQL and when can you use it? So dynamic SQL is the programming method that allows building SQL statements during runtime. So you can use dynamic SQL when you do not know the full text of the SQL statements which are used in the program until runtime. So moreover, dynamic SQL can execute SQL statements that are not supported by static SQL programs. So dynamic SQL helps to build more flexible applications. The next question is, what do you understand by tables and fields in a database? So tables are the database objects where data is stored logically. So like a spreadsheet, data is stored in the form of rows and columns in the database table. A row in the table represents a record and columns represent the different fields. So fields have different data types such as text, dates, numbers, and links. Okay, so for example, consider the customer database in the screenshot. And in this screenshot, there are rows which consist of the company names and columns consist of the various details of the customers like first name, last name, age, location, and so on. So here number one indicates a record and number two indicates a field and number three indicates the field value. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the thing that we have just discussed. Let's move on to the next question. So what are the different types of tables used in SQL? So this is a very simple question, and as you can see on the screen, these are the various types of tables which are used in SQL: partition table, temporary tables, system tables, and white tables. So now the next question can be, like based on the previous question, what do you understand by temporary tables? So temporary tables only store data during the current session, and they will be dropped once the session is over. With temporary tables, you can create, read, update, and delete records like permanent tables. So here, there's one point that you must understand, that there are two types of temporary tables. So the first one is the local, and the second one is the global temporary table. So local temporary tables are only visible to the users who have created them, and they are deleted the moment user disconnects from the instance of the SQL server. And on the contrary, global temporary tables are visible to all the users, and they are deleted only when all the users who reference the tables get disconnected. So let's move to the next question. And guys, this is a very important question as far as SQL interview is concerned. And this is a basic question also. So what do you mean by primary key and foreign key in SQL? So primary key is a field or a combination of many fields that help identify records in a table. So now you must understand that there can be only one primary key for a particular table. So the table that has a primary key is known as the parent table. Okay, and now if you talk about the foreign key, so a foreign key is the field or a combination of fields of a table that links the primary key of another table. So a foreign key is used to create a connection between two tables. So unlike the primary key, a table can have one or many foreign keys. The table that has a foreign key is also known as the child table. So the next question is, what do you mean by super key and candidate key? So super key may be a single or a combination of keys that helps to identify a record in the table. You must understand that super keys can have one or more attributes, even though all the attributes are not necessary to identify the records. And now if you talk about the candidate key, so candidate key is a subset of the super key, which can have one or more than one attributes to identify the records in the table. So unlike the super key, all the attributes of the candidate key must be helpful to identify the records. So there's one more important point that you must understand, that all the candidate keys can be super keys, but all the super keys cannot be candidate keys. So this is a primary difference between a super key and a candidate key. The next question is, what do you understand by composite keys? So composite key is a combination of two or more columns in a table that are used to identify a row in the table. So you must know that a combination of columns is essential in creating composite keys, because a single column in a composite key cannot identify a row in a table. So we can say that the composite key is a primary key with a few more attributes of columns. Also, a composite key can be a combination of candidate keys. The next question is, what is join operations in SQL, and mention their types? So join is a logical operation which is used to retrieve data from two or more tables. It can be applied only when there is a logical relationship between the tables. Moreover, the join operator uses the data of one table to retrieve the data from another table. And now if you talk about the types of joins, so there can be various joins such as inner join, left join, right join, full join, and cross join. So the next question is, what do you mean by self join? So in self join operation, a table is joined with itself to retrieve the desired data. So every join operation needs two tables as a basic rule. So therefore, in self join, a table is joined with an instance of the same table. So by doing this, values of two table columns are compared with each other, and the desired data is retrieved as the result set. The next question is, what do you understand by cross join? So cross join is basically the Cartesian product type in which Each row in the table is paired with all the rows of another table. So the result set will be paired combination of the rows of two tables. So generally, a cross join is not preferred by developers as it increases the complexity in programs when there are many rows in the tables. But it can be used in queries if you identify normal join operation won't be effective for your query. So using a cross join depends entirely on the scenario at hand. The next question is, what are SQL constraints? So SQL constraints specify conditions for a column or a table to manage the data stored in the tables effectively. And now if we talk about the types of SQL constraints, so there are various constraints such as not null, unique, check, default, create index, primary key, and foreign key. The next question is, what are local and global variables? So local variables are declared inside a function so that only that function can call them. They only exist until the execution of that specific function. So generally, local variables are stored up in stack memory and cleaned up automatically. And now if you talk about the global variables, so they are declared outside of a function. They are available until the execution of the entire program. So unlike local variables, global variables are stored in the fixed memory and not cleaned up automatically. The next question is, what is an index in SQL and mention its types? So an index is used to retrieve data from a database quickly. So generally, indexes have keys taken from the columns of the tables and views. So we can say that SQL indexes are similar to the indexes in the books that help to identify pages in that book quickly. So there are two types of indexes. So the first one is the clustered index and the second one is the non-clustered index. The next question over here is, mention the different types of SQL commands or SQL subsets. So as you can see on the screen, these are the various types of SQL commands. So the first one is the DDL or the data definition languages. The second one is the DML or the data manipulation language. Third one is the DCL, which is the data control language. Next you have is TCL, which is the transaction control languages. And the last one is the data query language or the DQL. So all of the statements or the commands that you use in SQL fall in either one of this category. So the next question is, which is based on the previous question. So what are the various types of commands which are used in SQL subsets? So as you can see on the screen, these are the various types of statements that can be used in each of this category. So these categories we have discussed in the previous part. So if you talk about the DDL, which is the data definition languages. So these are the statements that you can use over here: create, drop, alter, truncate, add column, and drop column. And now if you talk about the DML or the data manipulation language, so basically there are three statements over here: insert, delete, and update. Now if you talk about DCL or the data control language, so here you can use statements starting with grant and revoke. After that, in the transaction control language, there are statements such as commit, rollback, save point, and set transaction. And the data query language or the DQL, so there's only one statement over here, which is nothing but select. So let's move ahead. So can you brief on a few DDL commands? So here the interviewer wants to know whether you have in-depth knowledge of the DDL commands. So these are the four statements over here. As you can see, alter, create, drop, and truncate. So if you talk about the alter, so this command allows changing the structure of a table. The next statement over here is the create. So what is its use? So it allows the creation of database objects such as tables, views, and indexes. Next statement over here is the drop. So this command allows removing database objects from a database. And the last statement over here is the truncate. So this command helps to delete all of the rows of a table permanently. So the next question over here is, can you brief a few DML commands? Okay, so as you can see on the screen, these are the various DML commands: insert, delete, update. So what is the use of insert? So this command allows inserting a data into a table of a database. And if you talk about the delete statement, so this command allows deleting specific rows from a table. The third statement over here is the update. So this command allows modifying a data in a table. Next question is, can you brief a few DCL commands. So as you can see on the screen, these are the three DCL commands. The first one being the grant. So this command can be used to share a database with other users. See, all the database objects can be granted access with the certain rights to all the users which are available. The next statement over here is the revoke. So this command can be applied if you want to restrict the access of database objects by other users. And the third one over here is the grant. So this command can be used to share a database with other users. So all the database objects can be granted access with certain rights to the users. The next question is related to the TCL commands. So can you brief in detail about the TCL commands? So as you can see on the screen, these are the three TCL commands: commit, rollback, and save point. So the commits command allows for saving the transactions that are made in the database. If you talk about the rollback, so this command helps to undo the transaction which are made in the database with the condition that the transaction shouldn't be saved. And the third point is save point. So this command helps to roll the transactions up to a certain point, but not the entire transaction. The next question over here is, what are stored procedures? So it is a function that consists of a group of statements that can be stored and executed whenever it is required. So here you must understand that stored procedures are compiled only once. They are stored as named object in the SQL Server database. So stored procedures can be called at any time during the program execution. So moreover, a stored procedure can be called by another stored procedure. The next question over here is, what are the SQL database functions? So SQL offers the flexibility to developers to use the built-in functions as well as the user-defined functions. So if you talk about the various types of functions, so these are the functions as you can see on the screen which are present in SQL. So the first one is the aggregate function. Next, you have the analytics functions. The third one is the ranking function. After that, you have the row set functions, and then you have the scalar functions. The next question over here is, mention the different types of operators which are used in SQL. So basically, there are 6 types of operators which are used in SQL. So as you can see on the screen, these are the various types of operators: arithmetic operators, bitwise, comparison, compound, logical, and string operators. So if you talk about the arithmetic operators, these are the various operations that you can do with arithmetic operators like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, remainder, or modulus. Now, if you talk about bitwise operators, here you have bitwise AND, bitwise OR, bitwise XOR, and so on. The comparison operators has equal to, not equal to, greater than, not greater than, less than, not less than, not equal to, and so on. After that, there are compound operators which has add equals, multiply equals, subtract equals, divide equals, and modulo equals. If you talk about the logical operators, here you have all, any, or some, and, between, not, exists, or, in, like, and is null. And the various types of string operators are string concatenation, wildcard, character matches, and so on. The next question over here is, what are the set operators? So as you can see on the screen, these are the various types of set operators. So the first one over here is the union. So this operator allows combining result sets of 2 or more selected statements, or the select statements. After that, you have the union all. So this operator allows combining the result sets of 2 or more select statements along with the duplicate values. Then you have the intersect. So this operator returns the common records of the result sets of 2 or more select statements. And then you have the minus. So this operator returns the exclusive records of the first table when the 2 tables undergo the operation. After that, the next question is, what do you mean by buffer pool, and mention the benefits of it? So a buffer pool in SQL is also known as the buffer cache. So all of the resources can be stored in their cache data pages in a buffer pool. The size of the buffer pool can be defined during the configuration of an instance of SQL Server. The number of pages that can be stored in a buffer pool depends upon its size. And now if you talk about the benefits, so the first benefit over here is the increase in I/O performance. After that, you also have the reduction in the I/O latency. The third benefit is the increase in transaction throughput, and the fourth benefit is the increase in reading performance. The next question over here is, what do you mean by tuple and tuple functions? So a tuple is a single row in a table that represents a single record of a relation. A tuple consists of all the data that belongs to a record. At the same time, tuple functions allow retrieving tuples from a database table. So they are extensively used in the analysis services that have multi-dimensional structures. Okay, so just for your reference, I've attached a screenshot, or you can say a table over here. And the highlighted row in the table shows all of the data belonging to a customer, which is nothing but a tuple. So as you can see over here, this table has attributes such as customer name, phone number, email address, and postal address. So one particular customer, you have all of these attributes. Okay, so here we have 3 rows. So we have 3 records over here. So one record over here means nothing but one tuple. So over here we have 3 tuples. So what do you mean by dependency, and mention the different dependencies? So a dependency is the relation between the attributes of the table. And if you talk about the different types of dependencies, so these are the various types of dependencies, as you can see on the screen: functional dependency, fully functional dependency, multi-value dependency, transitive dependency, and the partial dependency. The next question over here is, what do you mean by data integrity? So data integrity ensures the accuracy and consistency of a data stored in a database. So data integrity in a way represents the data quality. So the data characteristics defined for a column should be satisfied while storing the data in the columns. For example, if a column in a table is supposed to store numeric values, then it should not accept alphabetical values. Otherwise, you can mean that data integrity is lost in the table. The next question over here is, what do you understand by database cardinality? So database cardinality denotes the uniqueness of the values in the tables. So it supports optimizing query plans and hence improve the query performance. So there are 3 types of database cardinalities in SQL, as you can see on the screen: higher cardinality, normal cardinality, and the lower cardinality. The next question over here is, and this is a very important question, so what do you mean by database normalization, and what are the various forms of normalization? Data normalization is the process that reduces the data redundancy and improves the data integrity by restructuring the relational database. And now if you talk about the various types or various forms of normalization, so as you can see on the screen, these are the various types, which is the first NF, or the first normal form, or you can say 1NF. The second one is the second normal form, or 2NF. Then you have the third normal form, which is the 3NF. After that, you have the Boyce Codd normal form, or the fourth normal form, which can be called as BCNF or the 4NF. The next question over here is, what do you mean by cursor and how do you use it? So in general, the result set of a SQL statement is a set of rows. So if we need to manipulate the result set, we can act on a single row of the result set at a time. So cursors are nothing but extensions to the result set and help point a row in the result set. So here the pointed row is known as the current row. So now if you talk about the uses of cursors, so cursor positions a row in a result set. It supports retrieving the current row from the result set. It supports the data modifications in the current row, and it allows SQL statements in stored procedures, scripts, and triggers to access the result set. The next question over here is, and this question basically is an extension to the previous question. So this question says, mention the different types of cursors. So basically, there are 4 types of cursors, as you can see on the screen: forward only, static, key set, and dynamic. So if you talk about the forward only cursor, so it is known as the fire hose cursor that can make only a forward movement. The modification made by the current user and the other user is visible while using this cursor. As it is the forward moving cursor, it fetches the rows of the result set from the start to end serially. If you talk about the static cursor, so this cursor can move forward and backwards on the result set. Here, only the same result set is visible throughout the lifetime of the cursor. In simple words, once the cursor is open, it doesn't show any changes that are made in the database that is the source for the result set. If you talk about the key set cursor, so this cursor is managed by a set of identifiers known as keys or key sets. So here the key sets are built by the columns that derive the rows of a result set. So when we use this cursor, we can't view the records which are created by other users. So similarly, if any user deletes a record, so we cannot access that record. And now if you talk about the dynamic cursor, so unlike static cursor, once this cursor is opened, all of the modifications performed in the database are reflected in the result set. So statements such as update, insert, and delete made by other users can be viewed while scrolling this cursor. So the next question over here is, what do you mean by entity and relationship? So entities are real world objects that are individualistic and independent. So rows of a table represent the members of the entity and column represents the attribute of the entity. For example, a list of employees of a company is an entity where employee name, ID, address, and so on are the attributes of that entity. So relationship indicates how entities in a database are related to each other. So in simple words, how a row in a table is related to the other rows of another table in a database. So this relationship is made using the primary key and the foreign key. So there are three types of relationships in DBMS, such as one-to-one relationship, one-to-many relationship, and many-to-many relationship. So the next question over here is, what do you mean by a trigger, and mention the various types of triggers. So triggers are nothing but special stored procedures. So when there is an event in the SQL server, triggers will be fired automatically. And in SQL, there are three types of triggers, as you can see on the screen: logon triggers, DDL triggers, and DML triggers. So logon triggers get fired when a user starts a logon event. The DDL triggers are fired when there is a DDL event. And the DML triggers are fired when there is a modification in data due to DML. The next question over here is, what is a schema in SQL, and mention its advantages. So schema represents the logical structures of the data. So using schemas, the database objects can be grouped logically in a database. So schema is useful for segregating database objects based on different applications, controlling access permissions, and managing a database security aspects. So in simple words, schemas ensure database security and consistency. And now if you talk about the advantages of schema, so schemas can be easily transferred. The next point is, you can transfer database objects between schemas. And the third point over here is that the schemas protect database objects and achieves effective access control. The next question over here is, what are the types of UDFs? So UDFs are nothing but user-defined functions. And basically there are three types of user-defined functions. As you can see on the screen, user-defined scalar functions, table-valued functions, and system functions. The next question over here is, what is the difference between char and varchar data types? So char data type is a fixed length data type in which the length of the character cannot be changed during the execution. So it supports storing normal and alphanumeric characters. And on the other hand, varchar is the variable length data type in which the length of the character can be changed during the execution. So basically you can say that char data type is static and varchar data type is dynamic. The next question is, mention the different types of aggregate functions which are used in SQL. So if you talk about the aggregate functions, so these are the various aggregate functions which are present in SQL, such as count, sum, average, max, and mean. So the next question over here is, what are the case manipulation functions which are used in SQL? So as you can see on the screen, these are the various case manipulation functions in SQL, such as lower, upper, and init cap. So basically the use of these functions is for strings, or you can say the alphabets. So if you want to convert any word into lowercase character, so you can use this lower. Similarly, if you want to convert a word into uppercase, so you can use this function. And the third function is the init cap, in which only the initial character of that particular word or the string will be in capital and rest of the things will be in lowercase. The next question is, what are the character manipulation functions which are used in SQL? As you can see on the screen, these are the various types of character manipulation functions in SQL, such as concat, substring, length, instring, lpad or the left padding, rpad or the right padding, trim, and replace. The next question is, how to differentiate single row functions from multiple row functions. So single row functions can act on a single row of a table at a time. They return only one result after executing a row. Multiple row functions can act on multiple rows of a table at a time. So they are called group functions and return a single output after executing multiple rows.